Hi, you're listening to the Content Sales Podcast, the show all about how to create content to attract, convert, and keep your ideal clients. Welcome to episode 247. I'm Suzi Dafnis, and here with me is my co-host, Michelle Falzon. Hey, Michelle, how are you?
Hello, Suzi. I'm doing really well. Thank you very much. 247. I mean, I just hear these numbers. How about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I am looking forward. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Sydney as we are recording, and I am looking forward to today's topic because we are moving very quickly towards the end of the year. So this is a lot of time where we are doing a lot of planning for the new year, which is always exciting, but it's not New Year planning that we're talking about today. It's a different type of planning.
Yes, this is all about how to plan a launch. And, you know, between you and I, Suzi, we have done our fair share of launches.
Yeah.
One or two.
One or two.
Right? They are a really great way to generate business and create a real buzz. And there's people out there right now doing launches that we wanted to help maybe with some planning strategies, or there's people out there right now who've maybe been launch curious, or maybe there's somebody listening right now who's like, what's a launch? This sounds tell me more.
Well, like Michelle said, it is, one of the most powerful things you can do for your business. And a good launch is something that makes me very, very happy. So whether you're launching a new product or service or a course, a well thought out launch can really make the difference between winging it and getting by versus hitting your goal number in sales and really creating momentum for your business. And we have seen, especially inside of our mastermind and inside of the network, like when people really understand and really plan out the launch, and we're going to give you some really cool steps today, it just makes such a difference. You're not just like throwing spaghetti against the wall. And while there are many aspects to launching in this episode, we're going to walk you through a step-by-step roadmap for the planning part of a successful launch.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. Rolling up the sleeves, ready to get in. Anyone who's listened to the show for a while will know that we're big on planning, and we're turning our planning lens right now onto launches specifically. And because there can be a lot of moving parts in a launch, like Suzi said, and because you're often putting in so much time, energy, and money into your launch, you really do need to invest in planning ahead of time to ensure that you get that best outcome possible. And Suzi, I think people really underestimate kind of what planning you might need to do. We don't want you to be planning in paralysis and never getting action, but you really do need a certain degree of stuff kind of bolted down, because an unplanned launch can put you in a world of pain. While they're a great way to get attention and create buzz around your offer, if you don't think through some important details first, you can quickly find yourself hitting overwhelm or not being able to get things done, or having like major tech hiccups because you didn't have time to test things. And it can make it really hard to capitalize on that opportunity that a launch can bring you.
And we'll come back to this, but even as you're thinking, like we're in the last quarter of the year, as you're thinking ahead to the next launch or the launches that you're going to be doing in the next 12 months, this is going to be really important, because time is something that you really want to use to your advantage when you are planning out a launch. So why is it important? We don't want to just set a date and hope for the best. A successful launch is actually like a carefully choreographed event. You're building excitement, you're creating urgency, you're getting prepared, you're leading your audience through a series of steps that ultimately result in them making a purchase, right? That's the ideal goal. But without a clear plan, you risk wasting your marketing efforts, missing opportunities, stressing yourself and your team out, and leaving money on the table. And when you have a plan in place, your launch can be an important part of your marketing. It can be the cornerstone, the key part of your marketing. So imagine the difference between just throwing an offer out there with no plan versus building anticipation over a period of time, warming up your audience, then opening the doors and having a flood of eager buyers buy your stuff.
I'll take one of those, please. But, before you even begin mapping out the nitty-gritty of your launch, it's crucial to get clear on one thing. It's going to underpin all your planning, and that is your goal. Every successful launch starts with knowing what you want to achieve and why you're launching in the first place. Ideally, you've done some bigger picture strategic planning. We've looked at your business goals and your strategy for achieving those goals. This is your business and marketing kind of planning. And inside our Marketing Success Mastermind, we plan the year ahead in November. And we're rapidly approaching November right now as this episode goes to air. And then every quarter, we're checking, reviewing, and recalibrating that plan, as well as getting crystal clear on the next level of detail to implement the next 90 days of that plan. So we're defining specific projects and deadlines that need to be met. So we kind of get the big picture for the whole year, and then we really get into detailed planning for the next 90 days. And overall, we recommend that entire process to you, because when you take the time to do that kind of planning each year, you're being strategy led, like the strategy is leading you forward. And then a launch is simply a mechanism for achieving those strategic goals. It's something that makes sense in the context of that bigger plan, versus just doing ad hoc marketing and latching onto a launch because Suzi and Michelle did a podcast on it, or you saw someone famous launching, or a friend of yours did it, or it's some bright, shiny tactic and you're not really sure how it fits into your overall plan. And you definitely want to be strategy-led versus tactic-led. And we have an earlier content sales episode that can help you with this type of planning, this big picture planning that we're talking about. And it's episode 195, Stacking Momentum with Your Annual Marketing Plan. So if you're thinking, hey, I need to do a little bit more of that before I'm really clear if I need to do a launch or what my goal might be for my launch, go and check out that episode. We will put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. So ask yourself this: what's the specific strategic reason for your launch? Are you aiming to generate a certain amount of revenue, or creating a campaign that your affiliate partners can support? Are you introducing a new product to your audience? Or maybe you're looking to reposition your brand in the market. So defining this upfront is really going to help guide all of your decisions, from how you craft your offer to the marketing tactics that you might use. So for example, if you have a large email list and a good number of affiliates who are going to support your offer, you might decide that you want to focus on a low ticket or mid-ticket offer that you can sell to a lot of people in your launch. If you have a small email list and big revenue goals, that might lead to you focusing on launching a high-priced offer. Now, getting crystal clear on the offer you're going to make in your launch, how much it is, what bonuses you will offer, how you'll position it, these are all key decisions that you need to make early in the process, because your whole launch is built on what you're actually offering. We want to keep that in mind. The end in mind is, what is it that I'm going to offer? Now, if you're curious about the elements of a successful offer, then we have a podcast for that. We have an episode for that. We lay them all out for you, and we give you a free template resource inside of this is one of our most popular episodes. When you hear the number, you'll know, because this right now is episode 247. And one of the most popular episodes that we keep referring back to, I probably recommend it at least once every couple of weeks, is episode number 23. It's called How to Craft an Offer That Sells. How to craft an offer that sells. Now, remember, a clear goal also makes it easier to measure the success of your launch when it's all over, and that helps you optimize future launches. The key is to know exactly what success looks like for this launch, so that everything you do leads you, steers you in that direction.
I completely agree with that. And so think of everything we've just said as kind of the pre-work you need to do before you even decide to do a launch, before you even start planning your launch. And now in today's show, we're going to really focus now in on the 5 phases of your launch that you want to include in your planning process. And just as a quick overview, we'll kind of get into a little bit more detail on this. But the first sort of phase of your launch is the planning phase, deliberately creating time and space for your planning in your calendar, getting that overall business strategy in place, seeing where your launch fits in, and actually making the space and time in a timely manner with enough time before your launch date to really do some decent planning. So that's the first phase you want to factor in. The second phase is what's called pre-launch. This is all about laying the foundation for a successful launch long before you even really start talking about your product or your offer. And then the third phase is pre-launch. Now, this is crucial for building excitement and preparing your audience for the actual launch. And we're going to go into detail on all of these in a minute. We're just giving you a bit of an overview. The fourth phase is the actual launch part. This is where everything comes together. The doors finally open. The launch phase is where you put your offer in front of your audience and start driving those sales, getting those buyers. And then the fifth phase is often overlooked, and that is the post-launch phase. After that launch window closes, many people think, hey, the work is done. But the post-launch phase is just as important as everything that came before it. And this is where you nurture relationships with buyers and non-buyers, and also where you learn and reflect on the existing launch to see what you can do better next time.
So good. So we're going to go deeper into each of those 5 areas that Michelle just mentioned. And you want to factor all of them into your overall planning. So a great episode that you might want to check out is our interview with Jeff Walker. Now, he created the product launch formula. And when we talk about these different phases of a launch, you'll hear that language in that interview and also in his book Launch, which I highly, highly recommend. It's a book that we recommend to anyone who is going to use this sort of launch process. So it's a proven framework. It's been used for more than a decade now by thousands of businesses around the world to create millions and millions of dollars in sales using this process. So if you're thinking of launching and you want to learn more about the actual process of launching, you definitely want to dive into Jeff's world, and you can learn more about that in episode 176 of this show. And that episode is called How to Successfully Launch Anything with Jeff Walker. We were going to put a link to that episode in today's show notes. I'll tell you where you can find those a little later on. And we've used Jeff's product launch formula successfully. Our masterminders use it. And Michelle, I know that you and the clients that you work with also use it successfully.
Yeah, it's a fantastic framework and, proven over, a really long period of time with thousands of people launching. It's a great process. And one thing I want to point out about that launch phase that we were talking about, and this is something I know Jeff is big on also, whatever you're launching, it needs to have what they call an open cart period. That is where the doors open on something special about your offer, and then the doors close on that something special that we're offering. Now, for some of us, we go, well, I don't want to close my whole product. I don't want to be opening and closing my product. Some of us do that. We only open our course once or twice a year, or our membership once or twice a year, but some of us want to be open all the time. And that's fine. You can use the same process we're sharing today for either approach, whether you're always open or whether you have your product closed and you only open it for certain periods of time when you're launching. And there is huge value in having launches built into your marketing plan, where whatever it is you're promoting is only available in a small window of time. So you can build up this anticipation. It's coming, limited time, that sort of thing. And it also creates this really intensive period where all the sales come in this short time. We can double down on really getting people excited, addressing objections, building real buzz. And there's also this degree of urgency because something is going to go away. Now, for some of us where our offer is closing, like you will not be able to buy this course after Friday, the thing that's going away is the whole offer. You can't get it ever again, or maybe you can't get it until next year, but there's some real pain there of losing access to the whole thing. Or it might be that the product you're selling is always available. So in that instance, you've still got a closed cart on something. You've got to have something going away. And in that case, it might be a special bonus. Maybe they can get 2 for 1, or they're going to get an extra year's worth of support. Or maybe there's this incredible pricing deal or special promotion that's going to go away at a very specific time.
Right, this is such an important point, and we could go on for days about launch strategy, but in this episode, we're not actually getting into the nitty-gritty of the strategy so much as the nitty-gritty of how to effectively plan for your launch. Now, of course, there are some aspects of launch strategy you really need to take into account when planning, so we're going to dip into those where necessary. So you're planning your launch. Michelle has already talked about step 1, knowing your launch goals and strategy. And that includes not only the specific outcome you want from your launch, but also how your launch fits into your bigger business goals and what your compelling offer is going to be. And as I said, we're not going to go deeply into those, but that's where you want to start. You want to start with knowing your launch goals and what strategy you're going to use inside of this launch. And taking the advice that Michelle said is having an open and close date on that launch. Now, step number 2 is know your audience. Now, before you even think about your launch offer and how and when and what all the moving parts are and how they're going to work, you really need to understand who you're talking to. Who is the ideal client that you're aiming to attract with your launch? What are their pain points? What problems are they trying to solve? Now, before you dismiss with this, well, of course I know who this is for. It's for my clients. We want you to go a level further and be very specific about the ideal client for this particular launch or offer. Now, let me give you an example. We launch different times of year. Sometimes we're launching access to the Her Business Network. Sometimes we're launching access to a course. Sometimes we're launching access into our wonderful mastermind. They're slightly different people, and it's important for us to know that so that we don't have a scattergun approach with our launches. Because knowing who the launch is for is going to shape how you craft your messaging and your offer in every aspect of your launch, actually. So you might need to build in time in your plan to send a survey or analyze some existing client information that you might already have in order to really do a launch that hits on particular pain points. So you might have a past survey that you can analyze. You might have the chat saved from a previous Zoom session where you got a lot of valuable feedback and insight from participants. You might have customer service emails or client interviews. There's actually a number of different ways that you can get the audience insight. And we've got several episodes dedicated to help you get those insights that you might want to dig into more. And one of those is actually an interview with survey and market research expert Ryan Levesque of the Ask Method. And that episode is on how to do client interviews. And that episode comes with a great interview guide. So we're going to put links to any of the resources that we already have that we think will be useful. We're going to put those into our show notes, and I'll give you the details of that earlier. So once I've got a clear picture of my big picture strategic plan, I've seen that a launch does in fact make sense and planned out who I most want to attract with my launch, then I'm going to move into step 3, which is mapping out the key dates.
Speaking my language there, Suzi. Let's get to those dates. I just love this part. It's when it starts to come into kind of focus, right? And just this past week, actually, I was helping one of our awesome masterminders with this very step in the process. And this is where those phases that we outlined earlier can really help you with that big picture mapping out of key dates that Suzi was mentioning. So the easiest way to do this part of the process is simply to list out those phases we mentioned earlier: planning, pre-launch, launch, and post-launch. And before you get into too much detailed thinking about each of these phases, just get a big picture sense of the timing. When does each phase begin and end? When will you get the planning done? When will you start to think about the planning aspects of your launch? When will you do this piece of work where you're mapping out the timing, where you're getting into detail on all the moving parts that you need to put together for your launch? You want to make sure you've done that well and truly before your launch. I have people sometimes say, "Oh, I'd love to, pick your brain on what I can do to get set up for success for my launch." And I say, "Oh, when is it?" And they give me a date that's like 7 days in the future. You want to be doing this ideally months ahead of time if you can. So how long will your pre-launch runway be? That's that period of time where you're warming up your audience. You're not yet really talking too much about the offer, although they might start to get a sense that something good is coming. And this pre-launch runway can be months or weeks, or if you push for time, days. Although, as our mutual good friend Stu McLaren says, the longer the runway, the bigger the launch. So if you can give yourself a nice pre-launch runway, think about a plane sort of taking off. When it's got the right length of runway, it can really accelerate and get into the air much faster and much safer. So I find how much time you have for the pre-launch really depends on that bigger picture annual plan for your business and how much time you have between promotions, which is why we said get that big picture planning done first. So, for example, if you're doing a special promotion in April and then you want to do a launch in June, you might want to keep your audience and your team focused on that April promotion and then turn to the pre-launch activities for your June launch in April once that, mid-April promotion is done. And I've seen some launch plans that have a 6-month or even 12-month pre-launch runway where people have built in lots of content, customer stories, sharing research, asking for surveys and feedback, all sorts of things that start to seed the topic that they're talking about, seed the desire for the problem that they're going to solve with the launch. And I've seen some launch plans where the pre-launch runway is small, just a week or two. So ideally, though, you're giving yourself a few weeks at least of pre-launch warming up of your market. And we have an entire episode. And again, like Suzi said, we could just talk for about 10 hours on this topic. We're trying to stay focused on the planning part. So if you really want to know more about the pre-launch phase, we've got this dedicated episode of the Content Sells podcast on that very thing. Plus, and this is really cool, this is something we normally would only give to our masterminders. We've given in that episode a free download, which is 14 runway ideas to boost your results. And I highly recommend you check that out. We've got literally pages of ideas for content and things you can be doing in that pre-launch period to really whip up a bit of interest and excitement and get people realizing, say, something's happening here. I really like what this person is saying. So
Gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go look at it.
Isn't it great when your own resources are really useful?
Well, I mean, that was like 30 episodes, 50 episodes ago.
Yeah, right. And
to remember.
It's a resource we gave to our masterminders and we thought, look, this is so useful. We're going to pull that one out of the vault and give it to you in the podcast. And so that's episode 199, by the way, creating a runway, how to pave the way for the sale and get more results for less cost. So, okay, now we've thought about all that. When am I going to do the planning period? How long is that pre-launch period? Now we're going to think about, well, how long is that pre-launch period going to be? And that's typically a very short, intensive time, that pre-launch period, right before the doors open on your offer. So in Jeff Walker's product launch formula framework, this pre-launch kind of strategy, the thing you're going to do in that pre-launch period is typically to provide your audience with a 3-part piece of value-added content. And typically it's a video series or a workshop or something similar. It could be a challenge. It could be just a one-off workshop that's a couple of hours versus doing it over, multiple days. And the whole idea here, though, is you've been creating this runway and now you're really accelerating things. You want to get a lot of people's attention in a short period of time. And you want to go all out and really build desire and demand for what you're about to sell, what you're about to open the doors on, while also adding a ton of value to people, having them know, like, and trust you, feel like, oh my gosh, I want this. So you want to map out that intensive pre-launch period that's typically quite short. And then you need to define how long are you going to have your launch offer open for? What's that open and close cart period? Now, we suggest a shorter window for your launch, open and close. I really like 5 days, but it's up to you to find what works. I've got a friend, Suzi, who does a 1-day open cart. And then, we know people that do 2-week and 3-week carts.
Yeah, I just know that this launch period is where you want to be reaching out to your audience daily, creating a big splash, really relying on urgency and scarcity and helping people make a decision about what to buy. And so I found stretching that out for a long period can be really hard to do. It's hard on you. It's hard on your resources. The offer kind of can get stale. But like Michelle said, I've seen people, I don't know how people do it in a day, like rock stars. And I've seen others do it 2 weeks successfully. So you've got to find what that time is for you. We typically do shorter Launches, as far as the open cart, is 3 to 5 days, and we've tried longer, and we found that we got the same results in less time, which is a good thing. And sometimes for some campaigns, it'll be 7 days, like maybe for our mastermind when that open cart is available. But these shorter periods of time really allow me and the team to maintain our momentum and our energy, because launches take effort. And, you know, no matter how many I've done, and look, please prove me wrong, I still find that they take me and the team, you know, it's a lot of resources, it's a lot of energy. And so we want to maximize the time that we spend. I mean, maximize the results and minimize the time. That should be a rule for everything, I think. Just know that longer open casts, longer launches does not mean more sales. No, it doesn't correlate.
And I think people do correlate that. They think, oh, we'll just leave the doors open for longer, but that can kill all of the urgency. And we often will see, you know, a big spike in sales on open cart day one as all that pent up demand, you know, gets released. And then we see another big spike on the final day of the launch when all those deadline dancers are starting to go, oh, I meant to get in, I've got to grab it right now.
Right.
And see really plays out. If you stretch that too long, people just get sick of seeing your messages really and tune out. So it's a very important balance. So we're still kind of inside this third kind of point that Suzi made, which was really mapping out the key dates, thinking about at a high level, what are the key dates of all these phases in our launch. And so we've been through most of the phases already. Let's block some time for planning. Let's make sure our pre-launch runway is clearly defined in a timeline. How long is our pre-launch going to be? Now we've thought about how long is our launch period, the open and close cart period, going to be. And then finally, you want to think about what kind of time you're going to put into any launch follow-up. Maybe you want to send a post-launch survey to everybody, or maybe you want to offer a low-dollar campaign to those people who didn't buy your main offer after you've closed cart. And don't forget about planning for internal activities here too, like doing a launch review and a debrief.
Right. And this is important. And again, you know, if you think about your calendar and your plan and your business, you want to actually build that in from the beginning, right? This is why it's part of the planning. And this is something we highly recommend, really taking the time to gather your statistics at the end of your launch that show how your launch performed before you move on to the next thing. Like, what was your average cost per lead? How did those leads convert? How did the various stages of your launch funnel perform? What was your total sales volume, and how did that compare with your goal? How did it compare to last time? What was your return on ad spend, your ROAS? Did you make the level of profit you were hoping for? You know, what system or process changes do you need to make the next time you do that? Are there whole elements that, you know, seem like a good idea at the time, but may not be necessary next time? Where did the leads and sales come from specifically? And so on. Now, these are all things that you want to plan time to discover and do right after your launch. We typically do it in the first week. Like, I might be gathering, or the team might be gathering some statistics along the way during the pre-launch, the launch period, the open cart period. But right after the campaign, in those next 7 days, is where we're doing a lot of that data gathering. But we've built that into our plan. We've built it into our schedule. And I mentioned team, and I strongly encourage you, as does Michelle, to include your team in the debrief. What worked? What needs to be done differently? Not only from the statistics perspective, but from our internal processes. Was one resource, one person slammed, and that area needs some extra resource? Does something need to be outsourced next time? Did you hit your goals? You know, these are all the things that if you have a team, you want to discuss and share with your team. Now, of course, you don't have to share all your numbers, but the key metrics you've used to determine success is always good to loop back to, so that your team knows how they did. And this is where, if we go right back to step one with your planning, one of the things we're doing is not only setting our goals for ourselves and what that bottom line, but letting the team know, oh, this is how many people we want in this part of the sales funnel or in this part of the launch. This is how many new clients we're looking to get at this particular price point. etc. All important part of having them rally with you as you go through your launch. And actually, we just recently released an episode, just the last episode of this show, on the 5 numbers that you need to track on your sales funnel. And that's going to be really useful for you as you're listening to this episode. That episode is called 5 Numbers to Track in Your Sales Funnel, and we will put a link to that in our show notes.
So many juicy links on this episode. And I love what you're saying there about the debrief. That's just gold right there. Just go back and listen to what Suzi just said one more time, because I have a friend, Justin Livingston, super successful, brilliant marketer, and he always says the fortune is in the debrief. And I think that's so true. You will learn if you just take the time right after the launch to take those learnings, immediately change them. You might have realized, hey, we slightly targeted the wrong person, or we made a mistake with the messaging, or we lost a lot of sales because we didn't have a particular tech thing buttoned up. Get those changes done, because they will make such a difference next time. Okay, so you've done this high level plan around the timings for the various phases of your launch. That's really step 3 kind of mapped out. What's the next part of our planning process, Suzi?
Right. So like you said, that was step 3. Prior to that, we talked about knowing your audience. Prior to that, we talked about knowing your launch goals. That brings us to step 4. And that is, who is going to be on your launch team? Now, before you say, look, it's just me, listen up. There's a great book written by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Ben Hardy, and it's called Who, Not How. I love this book. We've given hundreds and hundreds of those books away, and it's all about how to achieve bigger goals by accelerating teamwork. What does that mean? Essentially, as a leader, we need to shift the question in our mind when there's a job to be done, not to how can I get this done, but to who can get this done. So you're switching from asking how to asking who. And when you're doing a launch, it's hard to do all the things yourself. Even if you have a small business or it's just you, I highly recommend that you bring some people into your launch team. Now, this could be a part-time virtual assistant. It could be an ads manager. It could be someone to help you with video and technology and so on. Now, just the other day, I was speaking to someone who was doing her first launch. She didn't have a team, so she enrolled her best friend to help her. This was her first time launching, and she did not know that this launch was going to go crazy. She did hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales. And that meant she was crazy busy. And she was saying how grateful she was that she had someone there to help her, because they were working into the night and there was just so many things to do. And she just really needed that support. Now, even if it's just you, we really want to encourage you to reach out and get other people on your team. One of my mentors used to say business is a team sport, and it definitely relates to launch because there are so many different elements that it's going to be hard for you to do them all on your own. So even inside of our mastermind, when we're having launches, we often see mastermind members become each other's team during a launch if they don't have someone in that role. So we've had people who they open up a pop-up group and they have another mastermind to say, you know what, I will handle comments that day because I know that you are delivering something, or I'll be there as a backup during your Zoom call in case the technology fails, or I'll, answer the Q&As, or whatever it is. I do not recommend, and I know, Michelle, you agree, not doing a launch solo.
Agreed.
That leads me to the next step in our launch planning, and that is step 5, which is, what is your launch budget? So now that you've got a sense of the launch goals and how many sales you want to get and what the timing is for the various phases and how much help you might need, you're going to be in a great position to get a fairly accurate launch budget in place. Even if you've never done this before, listen up. How much are you going to allocate for any paid advertising or paid promotion? What is it going to cost you to get the support you need in terms of team or of software or of subscriptions? Like, what are you going to need? And you want to capture this in a simple big picture budget, which you can always recalibrate during the launch if sales are up and you can decide, oh, you know what, I'm going to put a bit more into my advertising because I can see this money's coming in. Like if you're finding that your leads are higher than expected, then you might need to cut costs in other areas. But you can only know this if you've got an idea of your budget and then you're monitoring that along the way.
So true. And I hope as you're listening to us, you're hearing, we're kind of talking about like, get these sort of back of the napkin type ideas down first. Like rough out what the timing might look like, rough out what the team might look like, rough out what the budget might look like. And once you've got these big picture pieces in place, you're ready for step 6, which is when you start to get into a bit more detailed launch implementation planning. And this is where you're going to look at each phase and start fleshing out exactly what's going to happen. How many emails will you send? How often will you post on social media? How will you build that sort of growing interest during the pre-launch? Will you make some lead magnets as part of that pre-launch? Will you post some videos? Will you do a survey? If you're doing a Jeff Walker style launch, what's the format of your pre-launch content? Is it a 3-part video? What tech platform will you put it on? How will you get people to register? How will you have people get access to the pages? What is the page going to look like? And if you're going to do a 3-part video, are you going to deliver it live, or will you make it ahead of time and give people sort of instant access when you announce it on the day? Will you have a Facebook group open during pre-launch? When will these things close? There's a ton of detail in this 6th step, the detailed launch implementation planning step. And we don't have time in this episode to list out everything that you would put into this plan. But the main thing you need is you might be able to use a spreadsheet, a simple spreadsheet, to just list out the things that you already see that you need. I've seen multi-million-dollar launches run off a spreadsheet very effectively. Or you might have a project management tool that you already use and you're like, oh, I'm going straight to Asana with this, or straight to Teamwork, or whatever the tool is you're using. Now, the mechanism for this planning is up to you, but you do really need to get this part done. And why you need to get this part done is so that you kind of know what the game plan is, because you're the ringmaster of the launch. You know, you're going to have team, you're going to have support, but they're going to be looking to you to say, okay, when do I need to have this ready by? What do I need to do here? You want to be able to brief your copywriter, even if that's you, on how many emails need to be written and by when, and what's the kind of hook or angle, or who's the ideal client for this. You need to be able to go to your ad person and let them know about the campaign and make sure that they've got time to work on it for you, and find out from them when they need the ad creative copy from you and when they think they can go live and what they recommend this time based on what's going on right now on Facebook. So this is going to help you put first things first, this detailed planning. And of course, while it's great to have a plan and you do want to do this step, there's really one thing for sure: your launch will not go exactly to plan. Stuff is going to happen. That is normal. It happens to all of us. But, you know, Suzi, I'd much rather have a plan I need to tweak than no plan at all.
I agree with you. I actually enjoy this part of a launch sometimes more than the launch. Just working it out, working with my team, getting the resources allocated, getting the big scope. And I find that the more time, again, not to procrastinate, but the more time put into really mapping out the plan. How many emails, what days are they going to go? What time of day are they going to go? Are they being written in-house? Are they being outsourced? Who's responsible? When do I need to see the first draft by? Who's signing off? You know, that's just like one little element, but the more that can be thought through, and a spreadsheet is more than good enough, the better. Because I remember there was this little webinar that we were running. It was during the pandemic, and it was like a 90-minute webinar. But I think it was the 6th time we ran it, there were still 76 line items. to be done. And that was the 6th time. So we had already done the branding and all the emails were written, everything was being tweaked, because there's always more worms in the can, I like to say, when it comes to these launches. So the plan that we've just been talking about is so essential. And this is where time can really be your friend when you're planning out a launch, is to going back to step 1 in that planning stage, really giving yourself the time to think through these timelines. So really trying to do a launch without the planning steps that we've outlined is going to make launching stressful, crazy making, in fact, and it can lead to doing a ton of work that you probably didn't enjoy and then not getting the results that you could have had. And I want to say that again, launches can be stressful. There are so many moving parts, even for a simple launch like the one I just mentioned. But when you get a plan in place, it makes it easier for people to support you. It keeps all the many moving parts clearer for you and your team and for your audience. So I'm going to recap these points for you. Step 1 was know your launch goals and strategy. And that's really putting in the planning at the top end. Step 2 is knowing your audience. Who exactly is this launch targeting? Number 3 is mapping out those key dates. And as Michelle said, she loves that part. Actually putting dates to things. When are things going to happen? Number 4 is who's going to be on your launch team. And even if you are a team of 1, who do you need to recruit for the different aspects of the launch? What is the launch budget? And then going into detail, diving into that can and figuring out what all those pieces are. Like, what are all those worms in the can of launching a new product or service? And doing a detail plan. Now, we mentioned, as Michelle said, a number of links, a number of resources, downloads from previous episodes, and we're going to put all those in our show notes for you. So stay tuned for that special link to the show notes where you're going to find all that. But first, we appreciate you listening so much, and we want to share with you what one of our listeners, Patricia Viscount, who's actually in Canada, hello Canada, who is a member of the Her Business Network, and she was listening to an episode that we recently did called How to Find Your Core Message and Purpose, which if you haven't listened, absolutely listen. That's an episode with Erin Weed. Now, a little bit about Patricia. She is a copywriter. And she helps service providers like coaches and consultants create authentic on-brand strategies, website content, email content. Now, she listened to this episode and she said, so great. She said, excuse me, she has a way of working with her clients where she's similar to what we do in that episode, helps them dig down to their core messaging and purpose. And she got great value from listening to Erin's process. And another person saw that review and said, oh, this was so good, I want to dive right in. And someone else said, wow, looks like a great one, can't wait to listen. So there was this cascading effect just based on Patricia's review of that episode. So thank you so much, Patricia. Now, anything we mentioned today is going to be, as I said, over on the show notes page. The show notes are going to be over at herbusiness.com/plan your launch. All one word, herbusiness.com/plan your launch. And again, thank you in advance. If you enjoyed this episode, if you're taking one thing away, if you would leave us a rating or review, we would love that. Michelle, we've got another great episode coming up next. Do you want to give us a little sneak peek?
We are sticking with that planning theme, but we are shifting the landscape a little bit. We mentioned today how we've created a structure in our mastermind and in our own businesses where we do our plan for the whole year in November of the year before. So you don't want to be planning your year in January, which is when most people start to think, oh, I better plan my year. But guess what? You're already behind. When you can start deep dive planning in November, for the year that's going to come the following year. And you can see that whole year and those big strategic pieces that will help you achieve your goals for the new year. You arrive into January set up for success. And this is really that part 1 of the process we've been talking today about. Get really clear on that big picture of the strategic direction. How does a launch fit in? Do you need a launch? So we're going to be sharing more on this process, how we do it, our best tips for it, and that's all coming up in our next episode.
And I'm excited for that episode. It's coming up 2 weeks from now. If you don't already subscribe to the show, just hit follow or subscribe wherever you are listening, and we'll be back real soon with that next episode. Thank you so much for listening. Michelle, anything you want to say?
If you are listening to this and you're hearing us talk about the mastermind, you're hearing about the planning that we're doing, if you're ever interested in knowing about the mastermind, we launch the mastermind. So it's not always open. And you can always, though, get onto the wait list. So if you're interested in finding out right now, are we in launch? Can you possibly apply to get in? Or can I get on the wait list so that we know when we're going to be open again? All you need to do is go to herbusinessmastermind.com. That's herbusinessmastermind.com. I know we have people from time to time say, hey, how do I find out more about that mastermind?
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you so much for listening. We love doing this show for you. We'll see you next time right here on the Content Sells podcast. Bye for now.